Today we're taking a look at items that become more important in patch 3.17 or items that may not have been on your radar after seeing changes throughout the last patches that may be more important, may have seen more play in the SPL and are somewhat more relevant, and you may or may not know about this yet. These are not exclusively items that have been changed in the last patch, but also items from the patches before that just haven't seen too much presence in casual games yet. Let's begin with Ancile or Ancile. This item already saw some SPL play in its current state because it actually has pretty decent stats. 25 power, 60 magical protection, pretty close to Genji's God in that regard, 10% cooldown reduction, and a 1 second silence every 60 seconds. Now this has a 30-foot range, and that means that it silences most mages on most of their abilities if they don't get out immediately. So I think this item is really important for assassins now to counter specific mages or guardians, as they benefit the most from a short silence. It allows you to use your escape easier, it allows you to burst a target without them being able to use their escape, and all of that kind of implies that the item has a lot more functional than it used to. The next one is also from the recent patch, Celestial Legion Helmet. With it having more protections now, it's actually a lot more effective when it comes to late game defenses on mages, and I think it has a certain viability against crit comps. However, keep in mind that it only works on critical strikes from basic attacks. So for example, it doesn't have too much use against a Naja who's building into penetration mostly, because it's not going to prevent the crits from the ultimate or other abilities. The item is definitely underrated at the moment, and I feel like we will see some pickups, for example, against Jing Wei in the SPL, possibly. The next item is Emperor's Armor, an item that you see so rarely that I actually had to look up the name. But we have recently seen this picked up in the SPL by Raffer. This item is probably better picked up in a coordinated team where it helps, and it's especially better ahead. But the item has shown to work, and that's something that's important. People were very doubtful if the relatively mediocre stats are made of by the passive, and at least to some extent that seems to be the case. The next one is Magi's Blessing. Magi's Blessing saw a price drop to 2,150 gold recently, and actually the item is not that bad anymore. People still have that stigma of the item being bad for the majority of the season, and therefore don't really want to pick it up and always want to have beads, which is fine. Beads are good, and you should probably have beads. But Magi's Blessing is a very nice addition against a high CC comp, and it works pretty well in combination with other items such as Spirit Robe, allowing you to go in while having reduced damage after being CC'd and being CC immune at the same time. So that's something worth keeping in mind. So Incon, for example, picks it up a lot on Guardians now, but I could see uses on mages as well as assassins sometimes. It doesn't have that nice CDR, which the other robes usually have, but still, it is a solid item choice in more situations than one might expect. Ninja Tabi also got changed in the patch today, with now giving 5 more attack speed, meaning 20%, and additionally having another 100 mana on top of that. This item is pretty solid now. The problem is there are not too many characters that make immediate use out of it, but especially when it comes to late game use, it is amazing for hunters, and I would build it right from the start because the DPS difference is not that high anymore with that 20% attack speed, even though you're gonna lose out on some ability damage. Also, it's worth noting that aside from hunters and attack speed based assassins like Bakasura, who might actually see some more potential due to this item being buffed, there are some warriors that can make use of it. Generally, most people think that warriors always have to go into Warrior Tabi simply to have that clear with the extra power, and because of the name obviously, duh. But it's actually not that simple anymore. There are 2 warriors that I could think of that could easily make use of this item, being Osiris and Longshan. Both of them benefit a lot from Death Toll, and with Death Toll being picked up by them most of the time, you benefit more from hitting more basic attacks, from having faster attack speed, which this item provides you with. And as they mostly clear with a mix of basic attacks and abilities anyways, I don't think it's going to take too much away. Longshan is going to have more damage in his 1, theoretically, because he's going to have more swings in his 1, and at the same time he has an AoE swing. And similarly, Osiris also has an AoE swing that he gets off faster with the extra attack speed. There's also another benefit with this item on both characters that we get to in a second. Pythagorean's Piece now has a 30 power and 15% magical lifesteal aura. So in total, you have 90 power, 30% lifesteal, and 10% cooldown reduction in the item. that is actually far from bad. The problem with this item is, where are you going to pick it up? What I would say is, and what I've seen in the SPL is, pick it up when you have 3 magicals. It's typically the mid laner that picks it up because the item has a decent amount of power, and while you may not make the best use out of lifesteal, it's good to have it somewhere. The jungler, mostly when it's magical, can't make too much use of it, and often if you have a magical ADC, they kind of need other items in order to be most effective. But overall, if you have 3 magicals, this item should be more than worth it. 30 power for everyone, and that extra lifesteal is huge in a good team fight. So I see relatively little reason not to pick it up, as it is just 1 slot and the item is still good. It's not a bad item by any means. 90 power is more than enough. So I would argue, as soon as you have 3 magicals on your team, just pick it up. All those reinforced Greaves, boots, whatever, are really, really good now. With that extra 25 protections that they're getting in the next patch, these boots will give you a huge amount of early defense. Combine that with the Mark of the Vanguard, and you are tanky as hell. Yes, you're going to lose out on some gold, so it's always a trade-off that you have to keep in mind, but generally, I think they're going to get picked up, at least by supports, a lot. Similarly, Shoes of Focus should be picked up more now. The item has 5 power less than Shoes of the Magi now, and 10 flat penetration. Yes, early flat penetration is great, but there are other items like Dynasty Playtime for that. And with that, I see quite a few reasons to pick this up, especially because it still has the extra 250 mana and 10% cooldown reduction. Not every mage is going to pick it up, but I think at least Janus, Nuwa, and Kukulkan, because of the extra mana on the item, should have decent reasons to pick it up, along with some others that are not so early game focused, like Shangqi. So overall, I think this item will see a decent amount of uses. Another one of those items we have hardly seen, except for being picked up by a refer very recently, is Spectral Armor. Just as a reminder, in case you've forgotten, the item now gives 80 protection, 300 mana, 25 crowd control reduction, 25%, and 3 seconds cooldown reduction on relic activation once every 20 seconds. That means you can use a relic, you can reduce all your cooldowns by 3 seconds, and that's really helpful in teamfights when you can basically rotate through your abilities that were on half cooldown again. Refer made very good use of this on Fafnir, and I will showcase how this is very, very strong. You can turn into the dragon form, for example, and use your steroid on your team in a Fire Giant fight. As soon as you did that, you can use Frenzy, and shortly afterwards you will be able to use your steroid again. Well, not shortly afterwards, but in a relatively shorter amount of time. If you combine that with a steroid before ulting, you have a total of 3 steroids just for that one fight right there, and that's gonna be very certain to kill the Fire Giant if the enemy team doesn't come over very, very quickly. And this is something worth noting, in my opinion. This is something that can be very important, and this gives this item a lot more value, especially on Fafnir and some other supports along with it, that should be kept in mind. Let's also not forget about Witchblade. Witchblade now gives 60 protections and is therefore a much more viable early pick. It has been picked up on Freya a lot, especially in combination with Spear of Desolation and Demonic Grip. You just have all that pen, all the damage that you need, and you gotta get so much defense against other hunters. Veneno has even picked it up on other hunters. He has picked it up on Ullr with success in that regard. However, it is a bit of a downtrade because you're gonna lose a decent amount of damage on other hunters. And obviously, it is a very good solo lane pick. And this is where I get back to what I mentioned with Ninja Tabi. If you combine this and Ninja Tabi, you actually get a very decent chunk on attack speed while not sacrificing many other stats, if any at all. You're sacrificing some power, obviously, but typically you wouldn't have power in your second diamond anyways, and Nemean is not going to help you clear, Breastplate of Valor is not going to help you clear all that much. But if you have this combined attack speed from Ninja Tabi and Witchblade, plus a death toll to sustain you, you have a ridiculous amount of early sustain in lane and a pretty fast, very mana unintense clear. So that's something definitely worth keeping in mind when you want to consider how to combine the items you're building. Last but not least, I want to make a quick mention of Runeforged Hammer. This item obviously got a buff, it got the little range buff for itself, bring it to the same range as Ancile is now, but I am absolutely not sure. Maybe there is a good niche for it now, maybe somebody's gonna find out that one trick, how it really works well on a certain character. I haven't found it yet. I don't know. I will no longer dismiss the item though. It could be decent now if somebody finds out how to fit it into a build so that it works. And it's probably rather going to be seen on high level competitive play than in any casual games where you don't really buy items to help your team more than necessary and instead rely on your own damage and stuff like that. That is all for today. I hope this was interesting. I hope this was insightful. Despite of having done the patch notes already, I thought it would be logical and make sense to highlight this specific items again. Let me know if you think I should do this for other patches as well, like a few patches down the road, or if you think that the patch notes review alone is sufficient in that regard. I feel like it's interesting because it gives you some extra insight from what's happening in the SPL and so on, so I thought I'll just give it a shot. Thank you guys for watching. I hope to see you tomorrow for the next video. Duke Sloth, out.